Today we have a great revenge story on a high school teacher. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my sister stole my cat and pretended not to have a clue about its disappearance. My sister and I live not so far, but also not too close from each other. Thanks to her, I got the apartment I live in, so it was easy to run into each other, especially on our way to work. She could easily stop by and have a quick breakfast at my place, and whenever I forgot or was too busy to go grocery shopping, she helped restock my fridge. We helped each other out, although we always fought like crazy, which was exactly the reason for us living apart, even though our parents found it ridiculous. I never understood why she always had a frown on her face whenever a cute little dog came over, whenever we were at a park or by the roadside. I mean, the appropriate thing to do was pat the fur or at least smile at the cute little animal. She never did these. Rather, she would frown at the animal and its owner, never failing to hide her irritation and anger, and even after the person apologizes and goes on with her pet, she would make a whole speech about how she could never understand why people owned pets. This has been going on for as long as I can remember. I gradually began to subconsciously suppress the urge to get a pet because for some reason I always felt like I was going to betray my elder sister, which now that I think about it was a very dumb thing to do, but on this very day, a coworker of mine whose cat recently had little kittens was showing us how cute they were, and I admitted to wanting to own a cat so badly, she gave me one of the kittens to care for a week. According to my coworker, the workload was too much for her to handle alone and she needed help. I was more than happy to care for it. It was a little difficult at first, but I got the hang of it. I didn't want to return her back to its owner, but I had to. A week goes by and my coworker comes over to see the little kitten doing so well. She tells me I'm officially a pet owner. I was so happy. I wasn't expecting her to just let go of one of the babies. I tried to pay her for it, but she just wouldn't take my money. She said she trusted me to care for the kitten. Let's call her Whiskers. I felt so glad to have a cat. I totally forgot about my elder sister and her hatred for pets, so as you can guess, her first encounter with Whiskers did not go well. My sister's first encounter with Whiskers had been unintended. I'd planned to officially show Whiskers to her when we were both at my place in a good mood, not her going into my apartment unannounced when I was at work. I knew as soon as I heard her voice that she had found out about Whiskers, and I felt bad for not bringing it up sooner. I tried to be patient with her, knowing fully well I didn't need her permission to get a pet, but out of respect and love for my sister, I tried to convince her that Whiskers wasn't so bad. She would love her if she spent time with my kitten, but honestly, she wasn't having it. I decided to cut the BS and told her it was my apartment and I could do whatever I liked without getting her permission. We got into an argument over the phone, and I hung up on her, and as my luck would have it, the next week my apartment roof starts leaking. Apparently the connection of the pipe wasn't as professionally done as they expected, and I'd have to leave my apartment for a while so they could work on it. I was mad, mostly because I knew I had no choice but to go over to my sister's place, and worse, I had to go with my cat. I had anticipated the strange look on her face when she saw me, so that didn't come as a shock to me. I told her about how Whiskers and I needed a place to stay for a while, and I promised to keep my cat on a leash and to never let her out of the room unless I need to take her out for a walk or during any emergency. Whisker was a gentle cat, so she never caused any trouble, so it was easy to fulfill my promise to her. My sister's job required her to be at work only when necessary, so she was mostly always at home with Whiskers. I never fully trusted her with my cat, but I knew she wouldn't do anything harmful to my cat. We bickered a lot over the cat. She would call at random times during my work hours to complain about how my cat was being such a witch and how I should potty train her better. Frankly, it was exhausting. I had contemplated giving my cat to the coworker who had initially given her to me, but I was too scared to take such risk. My cat could end up liking the place better. Or worse, my coworker might end up wanting her cat back, and I just couldn't risk it. So I just stayed, and eventually my sister's bickering became lesser than normal, which was a good thing. We had spent close to 3 weeks at my sister's place when I got called that my apartment was fixed and I could move back in. My sister in fact gave the reaction I expected her to give when I told her my apartment had been fixed and I would be moving back the next day. She was thrilled to finally have my cat out of her apartment, and I was more than happy to have my place back to myself. I moved back to my apartment and settled back in nicely. It was a really busy week at work, so I was mostly coming back late. But I would always find Whiskers waiting by the door for me, probably hungry, and would feed them, and this was a regular routine I'd gotten used to. So when I came home on this particular day without Whiskers waiting for me, I thought it was odd, so I called out for her, but there was no response. I initially thought she must have crawled into a corner and fallen asleep, so I went about doing my own thing, and before I knew it, an hour had passed and my apartment was way too silent than normal. I decided to look around for her, only to find out she was nowhere to be found. This was when I started to panic. No one had access to my house other than my sister. So I gave her a call, and she sounded nonchalant over the phone, saying I must not have looked around properly because she had no idea where my cat was. I lived on the 5th floor of my apartment, and there wasn't any way for my cat to crawl into the next apartment, but still I asked around, and no one seemed to have seen Whiskers. I searched the whole neighborhood frantically and became so worried I couldn't sleep all through the night. The next day, my elder sister came over to show her support for me. If I'm being honest, a part of me suspected her, but I ignored that part because my sister knew what my cat meant to me and wouldn't go that far. A day turned to a week, and a week turned to 2. It had been 2 weeks and my cat was still nowhere to be found, and my sister didn't make things better. Her support felt so suffocating and annoying. If I made a statement about how Whiskers must be feeling, she would roll her eyes and murmur about how I should just get over the cat already, before coming over to hug me like I was some sort of idiot who couldn't hear her talking. There were times I wanted to tell her to freak off and just leave me alone, but she was doing her best to be supportive, and I didn't want her to feel bad over just trying to help out in her own way. A month and a few days had passed and my cat was still nowhere to be found. I went out to throw away my trash when I saw my next door neighbor strolling in. She was a quiet and mostly indoor kind of lady, so we didn't have a close relationship, but we acknowledged one another whenever we bumped into each other anywhere. I made a small wave at her and was about going on my own way when she stopped me. And I could see she was a bit hesitant to talk at first, but she finally did tell me that my sister came for my cat the day it went missing. I wasn't surprised at this. In fact, a part of me had been anticipating this news, but I needed to be sure. So I asked how exactly that had happened, and she said she was about to go somewhere when she saw my sister going somewhere with my cat. She asked to remain anonymous because she didn't want to be a part of any drama, and I thanked and told her that it wasn't going to be a problem. I was too upset to go about confronting my sister. I wanted to hit her where it hurt the most, so I put up a plan on how to get back at her and began exacting my revenge. Firstly, I invited her over for dinner. It was one of those long days she had to show up to work, so she was more than happy at the mention of free food and wine. I made sure to put on a smile as she arrived and got her drunk enough to ask her to play a game of 20 questions. I got the opportunity to ask her what meant most to her between her apartment or her job, and of course, she chose her job. I pressed on further by asking about any slip and mistakes that she must have made that almost made her lose her job, and she told me some stories which would cause her to lose her job, and normally my sister was the cautious type who would never respond to these questions. She was way too cautious and protective of her private life, but she was more than happy to divulge information I needed to get back at her. By the end of the night, I had more than enough information to implicate her. I got her phone and sent an apology email to her boss confessing a mistake she made at work in sorting the distribution of some goods and making someone else take the fall for it. The next day, my sister woke up to the biggest shock of her life. She had been fired by her boss. She kept thinking back to last night and how she must have made a massive mistake and called her boss, who wasn't having it. Apparently, she had caused not just one, but a couple of staff to lose their jobs by pinning a mistake she made on them, and this was a huge problem she had to sort out. I eventually traced back the whereabouts of my cat, and it turned out my sister sold my cat to a random stranger online. They met up after she had been paid and gave him the cat. I refunded the person and got my cat back, which was an even bigger shock to my sister. I could tell she wanted to ask if I knew about her involvement, but she couldn't bring herself to ask, and I also never told her anything. For once, it felt good to see her feeling as miserable as I felt when she stole my cat, and I bet she has no idea I was responsible for outing her to her boss. I mean, I feel like you don't even have to say anything. It kind of speaks for itself when she mysteriously gets fired, and then, surprise, OP has their cat back. Somebody as low and backstabbing and capable as that sister is, I'm sure she can understand exactly what went down here. That said, I would change the locks ASAP and be putting a camera in. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is Cyberbully and Abuser Gets What's Coming for Her for Spinning Lies About Me. I used to be more like a poster child and would never have imagined that my life would take a bad turn, but it did. My struggles with addiction began in my senior year of high school, shortly after my younger brother took his own life. The pain was unbearable and I turned to drugs to numb the agony. For 5 long years, I was lost in a haze of substance abuse. Isolation became my only companion, as my family couldn't bear witness to my self-destruction. They distanced themselves, leaving me alone in my misery. The turning point came when I hit rock bottom. I was tired of living in darkness and despair. I checked myself into rehab, determined to get clean. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I managed to claw my way back to sobriety. 4 years have passed since I last used hard drugs, and I've been rebuilding my life one step at a time. Now, I work at a physically demanding job in construction, which helps me stay active and fit. The routine and hard work give me a sense of purpose. My healthier lifestyle includes daily exercise at the gym and evening walks in the park. I've also adopted a balanced diet, which has helped me shed the excess weight I carried during my addiction years. Meeting Emma was another blessing. We met at work and our connection was immediate. Emma is kind and supportive and always knows how to lift my spirits. She stood by me as I navigated my new life, offering encouragement and love. With her by my side, I felt like I could conquer anything. Life was finally starting to look up, and I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. One evening, Emma was scrolling through a local Facebook group called Are We Dating the Same Guy? When she stumbled across a post that made her heart sink. She called me over, her face pale with concern. The post was about me. A woman I had never met accused me of beating my ex-wife, even though I'd never been married. She had screenshots of my old Bumble profile, including pictures, my full name, birth date, cell phone number, and home address. As if that wasn't enough, she also included the address and phone number of my current workplace. The post was written with such conviction that anyone who read it would believe it. She claimed I had unmatched her on Bumble before she could message me and that a friend of hers confirmed my abusive behavior. My heart pounded as I read the comments under the post. People agreed with her, calling me vile names and discussing how men like me deserve to be exposed and punished. Not one person questioned her claims or asked for proof. My private information was out there for the world to see, and it felt like my worst nightmare come true. I stared at the screen in disbelief. How could someone make such horrible accusations against me? I felt a wave of anger and distress crash over me. I started shaking and tears welled up in my eyes. Emma held me close as I broke down, the emotional toll of the false accusations overwhelming me. She whispered soothing words trying to calm me, but I could see the worry in her eyes. After a few moments, I knew I couldn't let this woman's lies ruin my life. Emma and I talked it over, and we decided to take action. We couldn't let her get away with this. We needed to gather evidence and clear my name. With Emma's support, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We were going to fight back and expose the truth. Emma and I knew we needed a solid plan to expose the woman who had falsely accused me. We decided to create a Facebook account to monitor her activities. It took us a few hours to set up a believable profile, complete with pictures, friends, and posts that would make it look authentic. We even joined a few local groups to blend in better. With our fake account, we started keeping a close eye on her. She posted on Facebook almost every day, often multiple times. Her posts were a mix of personal updates and malicious accusations against various people. It quickly became clear that I wasn't her only target. She had a habit of doxing anyone she felt wronged her, sharing their private information and encouraging others to harass them. One of the other victims the woman targeted was a young woman named Brooke. Brooke had recently moved to our city for a fresh start after escaping an abusive relationship. She was rebuilding her life, finding a new job, and making new friends. However, her world was shattered when she became the subject of one of the woman's malicious Facebook posts. The woman claimed that Brooke was a manipulative gold digger who preyed on wealthy men. She posted private details about Brooke, including her new address and place of work, urging people to warn others about her. The comment section exploded with hateful messages, with strangers calling Brooke all sorts of vile names and even threatening her safety. Brooke's employer was notified about the post, and despite her attempts to explain the situation, she was let go from her job. The fear and stress caused by the harassment forced her to move again, breaking the fragile sense of stability she had worked so hard to build. She became reclusive, afraid to trust new people and wary of the online world. The ordeal took a significant emotional toll on Brooke. She struggled with anxiety and depression, feeling betrayed by the very community she had hoped would be a safe haven. The relentless cyberbullying made her question her worth and her decision to start anew in our city. Through mutual friends, I learned about Brooke's story and reached out to offer support. I reached out to her to share my own story and assured her that we were going to pay the woman back for spreading all these lies about us. We began taking screenshots of her posts, especially those where she spread lies about me and others. We noted down every detail of her harassment, including the dates and times of her posts. The more we dug, the more we found. She seemed to thrive on creating chaos and hurting people. It was disturbing, but it fueled our determination to stop her. Emma and I spent several evenings brainstorming our next steps. We discussed various options, but we knew we needed a plan that would have a real impact. Reporting her to her employer seemed like the best course of action. She worked at a local daycare center, and we couldn't imagine they would be okay with her behavior. We organized all the evidence we had gathered, making sure it was foolproof and easy to present. We compiled the screenshots along with a summary of her actions and how they had affected me and others. It was a painstaking process, but we wanted to make sure we had everything we needed to make a strong case. With our evidence in hand, we were ready to take the next step. We hoped that by confronting her employer, we could not only clear my name, but put an end to her harmful behavior. It was time to expose the truth and get justice. The next morning, Emma and I drove to the daycare center where the woman worked. The building was a quaint, cheerful place with brightly colored walls and children's drawings taped to the windows. It seemed hard to believe that someone capable of such malice worked here. We walked inside and a friendly receptionist greeted us. We asked to speak with the director, explaining that it was a matter of urgency. After a brief wait, we were led into a small, cozy office where the daycare director, Miss Johnson, sat behind her desk. She was a kind-looking woman in her 50s with a warm smile that faded as she listened to our story. I introduced myself and explained why we were there. Emma and I presented the evidence, starting with the screenshots of the false accusations against me. We showed Miss Johnson how the woman had not only lied about me, but also shared my private information, putting me at risk. We then revealed the pattern of harassment she had exhibited against multiple people. Miss Johnson's expression shifted from confusion to shock the more information we gave her. Apparently, this serial abuser had been the complete opposite at work. Seems like she was more like those people who hid behind their phones to expose the real wicked contents of their heart. Miss Johnson asked questions, seeking clarification on some points, and we answered them as best we could. The room was tense, but we could see that she understood the seriousness of the situation. Miss Johnson took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. This behavior is completely unacceptable, especially for someone in a position of trust with children. I will handle this matter immediately." A few days later, we received an email from Miss Johnson. She informed us that the woman had been fired on the grounds of harassment and misconduct. Emma and I couldn't help but wonder how the woman reacted to losing her job. We imagined her shock and anger, but it was a necessary consequence of her actions. She needed to understand that her behavior had real-world implications. Even after the woman was fired, Emma and I knew we couldn't let our guard down. We continued to monitor her online activities using the fake Facebook account. Every day, we checked her posts, looking for any signs of her returning to her old habits. One evening, while scrolling through her profile, we discovered a new post that caught our attention. She had created a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Help Me Pay My Rent." In her plea for donations, she painted herself as a victim of unjust circumstances, conveniently omitting the real reason she lost her job. She claimed she was wrongfully terminated and needed financial help to avoid eviction. Emma and I were outraged. It was clear she was trying to manipulate others into feeling sorry for her. We knew we had to take action. We reported the campaign to GoFundMe, providing screenshots of her previous harassment posts and explaining how she was fired for her abusive behavior. We detailed the lies she had told and how she had endangered others by sharing their private information. A few days later, we received a notification from GoFundMe stating that her campaign had been shut down for violating their terms of service. It was another small victory for us. We imagined her frustration and desperation as she realized her attempt to gain sympathy and money had failed. The woman's online posts grew increasingly desperate. She ranted about losing her job and the unfairness of it all, but she never mentioned the real reasons behind her termination. It was clear she was struggling, and there were hints of her trying to retaliate, though nothing came of it. For me, each small victory felt like a step towards justice. I felt empowered knowing that I'd taken control of the situation and stood up for myself. Emma and I shared a sense of satisfaction, knowing that our efforts were paying off. We had not only cleared my name, but also stopped a serial bully from harming others. It was a hard-fought battle, but we emerged stronger and more determined than ever to protect ourselves and each other. As I look back on the whirlwind of events, I'm struck by how much my life has changed in such a short time. The initial shock of seeing that Facebook post accusing me of horrific things was like a punch to the gut. I felt like my past, my struggle to get clean, and the progress I'd made were all being ripped apart by a stranger's lies. But now, standing on the other side of it, I see how much stronger I've become. I mean, I just feel like if it wasn't going to end in them getting fired and kicked out of their job and kind of shunned by the own community that they were trying to appeal to, it probably would have ended up in some kind of like actual libel lawsuit. Shout out to J. Jonah Jameson for teaching me the difference between slander and libel. Our next story is, I had the last laugh on my teacher during my last year in high school. My name is Mark, 50-year-old male, and I was 18 years old during my senior year in high school and had the last laugh against one teacher who had it all out for me. I was an average student with a passion for history and a dream of going to college. My family was close-knit. My older sister, Lisa, had graduated a few years before me and left quite an impression on some teachers, though not always in a good way. On the first day of my civics class, I walked in feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Mr. K, our teacher, was an imposing figure with a stern expression. As he took attendance, he paused when he reached my name. "Mark, are you related to Lisa?" he said in his thick West African accent. I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Mr. K shook his head and muttered, "Bad citizen, I will have to watch you." I thought he was joking, but his tone was far from humorous. From that moment on, it was clear Mr. K had it out for me. He seemed determined to make my life difficult, as if punishing me for my sister's past. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long, unfair semester. The first incident happened just a few days into the semester. We were reading from the textbook when Mr. K suddenly stopped the class. "Mark, stop talking," he barked. I was stunned. I hadn't said a word. I tried to explain, but he cut me off. "Enough! Go to the office." Despite my protests, he wrote me a referral slip and sent me away. In the office, the principal listened to my side of the story and sighed. "Mark, we've heard similar complaints about Mr. K. Just try to stay out of trouble, okay?" I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. As the weeks went by, these incidents became routine. Mr. K would accuse me of talking, not paying attention, or disrupting the class. Each time I'd get sent to the office only to return with a warning, but the worst part was the grades. No matter how hard I studied, my tests came back with C's and D's. I remember one test vividly. I had answered every question correctly, but Mr. K marked it down for poor handwriting. It wasn't just tests. He would deduct points from assignments for arbitrary reasons. One day he gave me a D on a project, claiming it lacked originality. Yet when I compared my work with a friend who got an A, our projects were nearly identical. One incident stands out among the many. It was mid-semester and we had a major project due, a detailed report on the structure of our government. I poured my heart into it, spending hours researching, writing, and perfecting every detail. I was proud of my work and felt confident I would receive a good grade. When the day came to submit our projects, Mr. K collected them with his usual scowl. A week later, he handed them back. My heart sank when I saw a big red D scrawled across the front page of my report. "This lacks originality," he said, barely glancing at me. I was stunned. I had worked so hard and I knew my report was thorough and well researched. After class, I approached Mr. K to ask for feedback. I said, "Mr. K, can you please explain why I got a D?" I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up from his desk, eyes cold. "Your work is derivative and uninspired," he said curtly. "Next time, try to think for yourself." I walked away feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. I knew my work was good. My friends who had received better grades for similar reports were just as baffled. "He's targeting you," Jake said. "It's not fair." The unfair treatment didn't stop there. During tests, Mr. K would hover over my desk, making me feel uneasy. Once he accused me of cheating because I finished early. "There's no way you completed this honestly," he said, snatching my paper away. Despite my protests, he marked it with another D. These incidents continued throughout the semester. My grades suffered and my confidence took a hit. I spent countless nights stressing over assignments, knowing Mr. K would find a reason to mark them down. Conversations with my parents and sister only added to the frustration. "I'm trying my best, but he won't give me a fair chance," I told them, feeling defeated. It became clear that Mr. K was intent on punishing me for my sister's actions. His relentless harassment and unfair grading made every day a struggle. By the end of the semester, I was at my breaking point. I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. The desire for revenge burned within me, driving me to take action and reclaim my dignity. The constant unfair treatment wore me down. I felt helpless and angry. At home, I vented to my parents and Lisa. "He's got it in for me because of you," I told Lisa one evening. She looked guilty. "I didn't think he'd still hold a grudge," she said, apologetically. My friends at school noticed too. "Why does he hate you so much?" Jake asked one day. I shrugged. "It's like he sees me and thinks of all the bad things my sister did." My grades suffered. Despite my best efforts, Mr. K's unfair grading dragged my GPA down. I worried about college applications and felt a growing resentment toward Mr. K. Each day was a battle and I was losing. The injustice of it all gnawed at me and I knew I couldn't let it go on. Something had to change, and I was determined to find a way to make things right. The moment I decided I'd had enough came after a particularly unfair test. I had studied harder than ever, but Mr. K gave me a D, claiming my answers were too simplistic. I felt a burning rage. That night, I laid in bed replaying every unfair moment in my head. I knew I couldn't let Mr. K get away with it. I started brainstorming ways to get back at him. At first, I thought about simple pranks, filling his desk with confetti or setting off the fire alarm. But these ideas felt childish and wouldn't make the point I wanted. I needed something bigger, something that would make him understand the frustration he caused me. Then it hit me: glue. I remember seeing a tube of super strong glue in our garage. What if I glued his classroom door shut? He always stayed late after school, so it would be easy to catch him alone. It was the perfect plan, simple yet impactful. The next day, I went to the store and bought an extra tube of industrial strength glue, just to be sure. I hid it in my backpack, waiting for the right moment. I also started practicing the plan at home using an old door in our basement. I wanted to make sure I could apply the glue quickly and silently. As the closing of the semester approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I went over the plan in my head countless times. After the final bell rang and everyone left, I lingered around the school. I waited until Mr. K was settled in his classroom, as he always was, with the door closed. This was my chance. I took a deep breath, feeling ready to execute my plan and get the payback I deserved. The last day of school buzzed with excitement. Students raced through the halls, eager to start their summer vacations. Laughter and cheers echoed as friends said their goodbyes. But my mind was on something else entirely. Today was the day I would get back at Mr. K. My heart pounded with anticipation and my hands felt clammy. Every glance at the clock sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. When the final bell rang, I took a deep breath. It was time. I knew Mr. K's routine well. He always stayed in his classroom until exactly 5 p.m., grading papers or doing who knows what. I watched from a distance as students trickled out of the building and the halls emptied. I waited until I was sure the coast was clear before making my move. I crept towards Mr. K's classroom, my backpack slung over one shoulder, the tube of glue inside. I kept my footsteps light, avoiding any squeaky floorboards. When I reached his door, I stood with my feet wide apart to prevent my shadow from being seen underneath. My heart raced as I pulled out the glue. Hands shaking, I carefully began applying it to the seam between the door and the frame. I worked quickly but methodically, making sure to cover every inch. The glue oozed into the cracks and I hoped it would set fast. My thoughts were a whirlwind of excitement, fear, and a touch of guilt, but I pushed on. Once the glue was applied, I quietly slipped away, my pulse pounding in my ears. I found a spot outside the school where I could see Mr. K's classroom window but remain hidden. Now, all I had to do was wait. As the minutes ticked by, I imagined Mr. K discovering he was trapped. Finally, I saw movement. Mr. K tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. He tried harder, confusion turning to frustration. I stifled a laugh as he pounded on the door and shouted for help. Seeing Mr. K trapped and the fire department called in was a moment of triumph. They had to break the door down to get him out eventually. The subsequent rumors and stories circulating the school only added to the satisfaction. The next day, stories circulated about Mr. K's ordeal. He was furious and humiliated, and while no one could prove I was behind it, he had a pretty good idea. During lunch, I saw Mr. K storming down the hallway towards me. His face was a deep shade of red and his eyes burned with anger. "Mark, my office, now," he commanded, not waiting for a response. I followed him, keeping my expression neutral. Inside his office, he shut the door with a loud bang. "I know it was you," he hissed, pointing a finger at me. "You're the one who glued my door shut." I raised my eyebrows in feigned surprise. "Mr. K, I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound innocent. "Why would I do something like that?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "You've had it out for me ever since I called you out in class. You think this is some sort of revenge, don't you?" I shrugged, maintaining my calm demeanor. "Honestly, Mr. K, I don't know what you're accusing me of. I was at home last night. Ask my parents." He slammed his fist on the desk, making me jump. "Mark, I know it was you. Don't think you're getting away with this." I met his glare with a steady gaze. "Unless you have proof, Mr. K, I suggest you drop it. I didn't do anything wrong." For a moment, we stood there in a tense silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Finally, he let out a frustrated growl and waved me away. "Get out of my sight," he muttered. Mr. K might have suspected me, but without proof, he couldn't do anything. The satisfaction of seeing him so rattled was worth every second of the tension. It felt like justice served, a fitting end to a semester of undeserved torment. It was a relief that he never bothered me after that incident. I was practically invisible and went on to finish high school the best way I could, salvaging my GPA that he had practically ruined. I guess nobody at that school in the administration department gave a crap about anything unless the teachers were making life hard for them. They go and reprimand the teacher for being the one that had some kind of revenge taken upon them and getting stuck in their room. That administration just reeks of, "How dare you make me have to do extra work and be concerned about something? Can't you just maintain the status quo as a crappy teacher in this crappy school and keep collecting paychecks like everyone else?" But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.